Do you know the shortcut?
Presenter's view.
Yeah, for the full screen.
Command 9?
F5, pero no sé dónde está.
No.
Go to slideshow. Slideshow.
No, you can't see the double screen.
Oh wait, there's a where? And it's command F1. Choose to have two screens or the same screen there. Now you have one
can I see it on both screens?
Now it's the same screen on both screens.
Ah, okay, perfect. Thanks.
That's what you want, you know?
Yeah. Right, perfect. No? Yeah.
Sí, donde quieras. Esto
Pero no puedo mover.
es lo único que no vas a poder es cambiar las
slides.
Sí, si quieres. Sí, me pones a alguien.
No, mejor si me quedo aquí para ustedes.
Sí, así estás controlando todo lo tuyo.
Yeah, so hello everyone. Thanks for waiting. Yeah, I had to get some adapter cables. So before I start the presentation, I would like to let everyone here participate a little bit and to like explain a little bit how you found this meetup and what is your personal interests and what do you want to get to know from being here. So let's say, like as a starter, how did you hear about Bitnation for the first time? Like maybe you can just make a round like this. So start if you want.
Oh. I'm British German, and I heard about this concept actually for the first time going through the list of all the meetups which are here available in Barcelona. And I think most of us are a bit more nationals, and so the bird I looked up and tried to find out more about it, but actually have no clue really what it's about.
Okay, cool. You want to go?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I believe it was suggested to me. Like nation, Bitcoin.
Alright.
But yes.
Cool. So you're also still new to Bitcoin and in general to currencies.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you over there.
We're also just on the meetup, blockchain and no more.
Right. So you're also new to cryptocurrencies and blockchain in general.
I know a little bit, but I would like to know more. So.
Yeah. Right. The same. Okay. Yeah. What? Ah, okay. All right. Maybe you or it's two. Maybe you first and then one up. So you heard about it before already? Okay, cool. Where did you hear about it? Okay. And you in front of them?
I know myself. So, that's not the yeah, and Bitnation, I just have something. I'm inside what is serving content. I think there's a lot of technology.
Right. So you're already working with Ethereum code, and you're already, let's say, a bit more educated in the whole blockchain space.
Yeah,
Okay. Cool. There in the table.
I'm a member of Bitnation. We are very interested in this model.
Mm-hmm. So you also heard about Bitnation before? Oh.
They are not
Okay, cool. So it's a perfect moment. I will explain everything from the very start. You?
My name is Jessica. I'm a passionate about technology, and I was actively looking for things about and about these meetup, but I really don't know anything.
All right, no problem. You?
My name is Jack. I'm for Bitnation Barcelona. I'm working in that project, and this is a project that I sealed 5 months ago, and we are now building a currency wallet, which will then transform to something what is called personal data locker. So it's meant to store all types of assets, not only digital assets, and it also meant to work as a dashboard of your life. So it retrieves all the data that it does and is your personal assistant or something like that. I came here because I'm interested in what's going on in Barcelona and blockchain, personal data topics. And I found this one very interesting and just came to see what you guys doing.
So you're personally interested into privacy and this kind of things?
Yeah. Privacy, data security, personal data safety, stuff like this. This is type of conversations that I'm looking for, and I'm also interested in organizing something for our project, Barcelona. So I'm potentially looking also some partnerships.
Okay, cool. You?
My name is Andrea, and I'm a programmer. So recently I started studying more developing something around Ethereum and everything. And nothing. So I searched for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and GitHub. So
Cool.
I heard about Bitnation in the past, but I never actually. So I read something in the past days, but I'm not really exactly how it works. So it would be interesting to.
Perfect. You?
I also interested in possible need for others, was a lawyer and so it's today.
Nice. And you're the last one. What of this?
My name is Sam. I've been doing mining for the last year and a half, installing hardware and doing work in ICOs. So we have a part of a community group that basically they rank ICOs according to what they are doing and stuff like that, and they basically recommend different investors. So obviously, a friend of theirs said, "Oh, check out this ICO that they did." I don't know if it's really an ICO because they just sent me the white paper a couple of days ago. So I just checked it out. I know it's from Barcelona. See what it is.
Yeah, perfect. I will get to that later on in the presentation about the token sale. So yeah, I think we're ready to start. So about me, I'm working for Bitnation now full-time. I used to be a volunteer for 2.5 years, and I help Bitnation as an ambassador, and I try to spread the word, try to recruit new ambassadors and to get partnerships, and yeah, to see where we have potential synergies with other blockchain projects. And I think it's a really good idea to give Bitnation this physical outlet so that we're not just virtual, so we can actually engage people also in their physical real life and not just online. So let me just start with like a quick introductory video. If it works.
Before nations, before borders, there was the Pangea supercontinent. Since then, the world has been divided by tectonic shifts, widening oceans, and a stifling politics. Nation-states are crumbling under the weight of local and global challenges that they seem incapable of solving. Rather than embracing a borderless world and increasing personal freedoms, governments and multilateral organizations have overseen a surge in bureaucracy, protectionism, and ever greater intrusions into our personal lives. To prevent a drift towards tyranny, we need drastic change. Pangea is Bitnation's decentralized jurisdiction platform. Using Pangea, you can build voluntary nations, agree contracts, and resolve disputes with other citizens, and access the services you need. This is our vision of jurisdiction as a service, a global market for governance services. The Pangea Arbitration Token, or PAT, is an Ethereum-based in-app token that powers the Pangea platform. When you create a contract, complete a contract, or resolve a dispute on Pangea, you receive non-tradable reputation tokens through Lucy, our AI bot. Accumulating reputation tokens earns you tradable PAT tokens. This ensures that you can't buy a good reputation or acquire it through popularity, but if you earn one, you will be rewarded. Imagine a world where people can freely choose which voluntary nations and jurisdictions they want to be part of. A world where voluntary nations offer a choice of services under their own laws and policies and compete for citizens in a free market that rewards good governance. You too can be part of the future of governance by joining the Pangea token sale. Welcome to the Internet of Sovereignty. Welcome to Pangea.
Yeah, so now that we had this quick introduction, I would like to give you also an impression of why I got into Bitnation. And I think this meme pretty much sums up, let's say, my principal motivation for becoming a member of Bitnation and helping them. So he's Cody Wilson, maybe you heard of him before? He said, increasingly all political questions that we could fight about have been relegated to an administrative sphere, so I could spend my entire career becoming one member of some segment of the government, yelling as hard as I could for many years, making a career. Or I could write software that totally explodes the paradigm, right? So the idea is that instead of waiting for government to give us permission to change society, we can just build a new model that makes the existing one obsolete. We can just go ahead, write code, and give people something that they can use to opt out from the existing system and to create something new. So the basic question that we with Bitnation would ask you is, would you like to choose your governance services just like you choose your phone provider? Because in a sense, the governance market is the only market that is an absolute, unquestioned monopoly, where you just have to live under the providers from the country where you have been arbitrarily born. Like either you have been born in Germany, in Bangladesh, or in Vietnam. Like you just have to deal with the consequences of living in this space. And if you want to choose a different governance service provider, you have to leave behind everything. You have to leave behind your culture, your friends, your family, your language. you have to overcome a lot of obstacles just to use a new service provider. So the big idea of Bitnation is that instead of having to leave everything behind, you could just opt out and choose another governance service provider without having to move geographically. It's the non-geographical opt-out. So one of our Japanese ambassadors, Tetsuya Oishi, said, the blockchain is not just for money. It's there for brand new governance structures, replacing the nation-state concept from the Napoleon era. Digital nomads like me know that national borders are imaginary. Our activities are global, but most governance systems are still for locals only. The government marriage system is one of the most obsolete systems today. Marriage is a very personal matter, but it is being enforced by governments, and the laws are so different in each country. So digital nomads know that they can, let's say, exploit the different local governance structures, but they also know that it's quite absurd that you have only local governance structures when you have people living an international lifestyle already. We live in a globalized world where people can more and more travel and choose to work remotely and can, let's say, exploit different governance systems and cultures, and they know that there should be something different from this existing system that serves their needs, but also not only their needs, but anyone's needs for people who don't want to be trapped in this local governance structure. So in the world today, we have a global geographical governance oligopoly, which are the nation states. So each of them has a monopoly over their geographic territory, and there's no one else who can question their authority. So they together build up the global oligopoly of governance services. This leads to war, injustice, corruption, and taxes. And the governance providers don't need to compete in their territory. There's no competition and therefore no incentive for them to offer better services to their clients, which are their citizens. So by actually opening up this market for competition, you would actually not only have a new alternative to opt out to, you could also force the existing governments to improve their services just by having a competitor, which they never had before. So another one of our ambassadors in Colombia said, Pedro Rivera, I want to create tools that people can use to manage themselves in society. The conventional law-based system is very weak for the society we live in nowadays. People with enough money or intelligence can manipulate and use it against society, as we have seen many times. So he himself in Colombia has seen how corrupt politics are, and that actually elections are more of a popularity contest than real competition of skills or serving the needs of the citizens. So actually the very system that is supposed to help you to be a service for you is actually there to exploit you and to take advantage of you. So that's actually not how governance is supposed to be. So what our platform that we with Bitnation are creating, Pangea, like the supercontinent that used to be in the beginning of the Earth, it's used for is to create binding peer-to-peer smart contracts with a decentralized mobile chat app with a very easily understandable chat interface that could also be used by people everywhere. Also even using emojis, which could enhance usability in third world countries as well. It is there to resolve disputes through a peer-to-peer market for arbitration services. So instead of having a monopoly for arbitration with government courts, you would have arbitrators competing for reputation. And thirdly, to create and join virtual nations and communities. Basically, this means that you have DBVNs, which are decentralized, borderless, voluntary nations, which offer individual services, individual governance services. They don't have to offer the full package like governments offer today. You can see it more like you split up the services each government provide and try to offer each individual one in a digital way and do it in a borderless and global way. So this way you could step by step start to replace the existing governance system through something based on blockchain. So going further into the use case of this, we already have 3.6 billion cell phone users all over the world, and 60% of them are in the developing world. So there's actually a big percentage of smartphone users also in developing countries. The biggest mobile chat applications like WeChat, Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, WhatsApp, and so on, they're being used every month, and it's getting more and more. Like society is getting ever more interconnected digitally through these chat applications. And at the same time, the global legal services market is worth more than $600 billion per year. So that's basically where we step in. Like we realized that to offer these services, you need to make them usable through a chat interface, not to offer just another platform where you have to move people onto, but that you can actually easily access them through existing chat applications like these that are mentioned. And at the same time, there's a big global legal services market, and at the same time, well, this is what I mentioned before. At the same time, 2 billion adults in the world are unbanked and have no access to the financial markets. So these adults can actually use this kind of platform to certify and to actually monetize their assets, which they could never do before because they were undocumented, basically. So governments in the developing world many times don't offer the same services like here, and people need to do things in a more informal way, let's say. Like they have to do handshake agreements, they have to participate in the black market or gray market. And instead of doing this, they could use blockchain jurisdiction to give their businesses more legal security. They don't have to wait for the government for years and years and years until any legal changes happen in their countries. They could do so in a borderless and voluntary way. And of course, this is something that people need to agree on beforehand, and that cannot be done with people who are not using the platform. It's only working with people who are both agreeing to use Pangea for their deals. But it's really cuts down the costs of legal insecurities when dealing with people in these countries, because now you have, let's say, the transactions through smart contracts, which I will also get to further on. But yeah, just to point out the market for what we're doing. And yeah, all contracts begin with a conversation between people. And smartphone chat is increasingly becoming the go-to tool for conducting business in emerging markets. For those reasons, we're convinced that our jurisdiction needs a chat interface. And which you can't unfortunately read with these fonts. Panthalassa, which is the ocean that was around the supercontinent Pangea, it is the mesh network that we are creating for the communication on our platform or on Pangea. So it's not based on the blockchain, it's independently from blockchains, it's blockchain agnostic. So Panthalassa allows you to operate without access to an internet connection, enabled by mesh networks and sneaker nets. So what do sneaker nets mean? Sneaker nets mean that you can literally go on your sneakers like from one laptop to the other, put in the USB cable or put in like cables or whatever, and it's an internet that works without the internet. So it's a local network. And Pangea actually works even without internet access. So that's a big idea, that you can also offer these services to regions in the world that don't have access to the internet yet. And even in these regions, people already have access to smartphones. So we could just install a relay to, for example, given one neighborhood where people are particularly interested in using our services, there would be a 25-kilometer radius of people having access to this sneaker net. And they could do agreements without having access to the internet. And whenever someone from this network goes outside and connects to the internet and comes back, it will automatically synchronize. This is a delay-tolerant network. So yeah, it's for both. It's for the developed world where we have such a rapid, technical, advanced people and infrastructure, but also for the developing world where people don't have these luxuries yet. Yes.
as a lawyer that
I will get to that further on, but like the question is if the service is done only between individuals or if there's also an intermediary like a lawyer or something else. You could do things like just between peer-to-peer if you want to, but you can also, there could be people offering an intermediary service, but it's all voluntary. So really, there will be, let's say, a market of governance applications or DApps, and you could also offer your intermediary service, and you will see if the market actually wants it or not. Maybe in some societies people don't need that because it's done in a local way and they don't need any intermediation. But maybe for more international exchanges, it does make sense to have But in any case, whenever you do a smart contract on Pangea, you will have to agree on an arbitrator upfront who will negotiate this case in case there's a dispute. So yes, there are intermediaries in that sense, but they're being chosen voluntarily. They're not forced by governments. Yeah, like I mentioned before, there are 2 billion unbanked adults, which form the gray economy or the system D economy, which itself would be the second biggest economy in the world, just by having these people as one economy. And 80% of the world population lives in frontier or emerging markets. So this is really a big part of the world that is not being served by the existing infrastructure that we have here today. So a part of, even bigger problem are the bad passports. So we being born here in Europe or in North America, we are blessed with having access to many countries by traveling or even working. But people from most parts of the world have bad passports, which don't allow them to stay anywhere any longer than 3 months. So they have to go through a lot of big problems if they want to stay in a country and work there. They have to live there illegally. They have no working permission. They're being sent out of the country. They have to deal so many problems, or they're not even being let into the country. So there's also a huge need for allowing these people to actually migrate. And yeah, if this gray economy was a nation, it would be the second largest economy in the world. So another one of our ambassadors, Christoph Feuermann, who himself is a digital nomad, said, passports are by no means necessary. Unfortunately, the global apartheid condemns millions of people to stay in their impoverished home countries. My hopes rest in the Bitnation platform, which possibly provides everyone in the world with a unique ID on the blockchain, which could be recognized as official travel documents by governments. So, of course, this sounds very utopian, but ideally, in the future, the IDs that are being issued on Pangea will, through arbitration or through a mediation with our ambassador network with each individual nation state's jurisdiction, be recognized as travel documents, so that Bitnation citizens are actually able to use their citizenship to travel. Actually, we have done a partnership before with Estonia, so we helped them to set up the e-citizenship, and they also helped us to get more recognized. And I see that in the future, more countries will want to become more digital and do the step, and let's say to go more into open systems like this to yeah, to encourage people to travel to their countries. So in our pilot project, this world citizenship looked like this. So instead of a passport, you would have these things, basically the timestamp on the blockchain. Like, it doesn't have to be on the Bitcoin blockchain like there. It could be on any blockchain, literally. So we designed the system in a way that you can choose a blockchain of your liking for the timestamping. Right now we're working with Ethereum, but ideally in the future you will be able to choose a blockchain that you think is best. And yeah, it has an expiry date, it has a picture, it has the QR code, so I think this is a very usable document, and could be sort of designed for future. Of course, there could be things change, and there could be different providers even for world citizenships. I mean, if you're not happy with the way Bitnation is doing these things, we're all open source. So we actually encourage people to fork our code and to become our competitors and to do things different than us, because we want to have a market. We want people to encourage thinking in this new paradigm that you can provide governance services in a decentralized way, in borderless way. And yeah, if in any case you're not satisfied with the way Bitnation is providing its services, you can always choose to fork our code and tap into this market yourself. So blockchain notarization is an effective way to record, for example, marriage contracts, wills, birth certificates, childcare contracts, land titles, and business deals. And these documents are permanently secured with easy access on the blockchain. The blockchain will prove your document's authenticity and your ownership at all times. So, of course, when you timestamp something, you have no guarantee that this is really that the content of this document is true. But what you can prove is that you're the owner. So at any time, you can just you can repeat the process of timestamping. If you have exactly the same document, it will give you the same hash. So this is a way to really prove that the document has not been faked or that has not been manipulated. So this way, blockchain is really great in the way that you can certify documents and they can never be manipulated again, because you will always be able to prove that they're fake or manipulated. So another one of our ambassadors in Ghana, Afrikaans Kofi Akosa, said, most of the properties in my country have no titles because of cumbersome process and corruption. A decentralized land administration accessible to everyone is what is needed, and the blockchain offers that very cheap. Sooner than later, the state is going to become obsolete. So what we have in Ghana is that the government is actually not providing its citizens with land deeds, with titles for their land. So people just have to agree between each other which land is which, and they have to fight basically for their land if someone else says, no, it's mine. So this is actually the root of many of local conflicts. And at the same time, these farmers are not able to use their assets, their lands, to, for example, use it as collateral for credit, to access a financial market, or to monetize it in any way. I mean, to build buildings on it, or to do these kind of things, because they have no legal rights for their lands. They just have the local acceptance, but nothing more. So they could actually use blockchain title to actually monetize their lands, or to, I don't know, use it for any sort of business deals. So we at Bitnation already have more than 10,000 Bitnation citizens, more than 2,000 open source contributors, more than 100,000 lines of code, and more than 200 embassies and consulates. I have to explain this. Embassies are places that Bitnation citizens offer for other Bitnation citizens to work together or even live together. So consulates are here like maybe workspaces or coffee shops or something like that, where they invite other Bitnation citizens to work together in a co-working space. And embassies are even more their maybe private space, or I don't know, like anything that you have ownership over, and you say you allow other Bitnation citizens to live there if they adhere to your rules. So you actually also give a physical component to this feeling of being a world citizen, that you can actually travel the world, and similar to couchsurfing or something like that, you can live at the place of people who are like-minded with you actually. And of course, we already have more than 5,000 notarized contracts. We have a public notary on our website, and this was also done in cooperation with Estonia. So we will also update this, but in general, it's already very cheap and easy to actually do this timestamping, what I was explaining before.
What timestamps?
So timestamping is the act of putting any file, actually not documents, but any file on the blockchain, because it's not actually stored on the blockchain. There's actually IPFS who's doing that, but the idea is to create a hash. So this is a code that is stamped on the this blockchain that can never be deleted again. And you can at all times go back to this block and show that this is your, let's say, code, that this is yours. And whenever someone doubts that you're the owner of this file, like it could also be music, could be video, it could be anything. You can repeat this process and will have to give out the same hash. So if there's one comma changed, if there's like any number changed, it will give different hash. So this is like a secure way of proving that you're the owner of any file. So yeah, for our technology, we're also using Ethereum, like I said before, and probably most of you are not familiar with these technologies, but IPFS is very important. It's a distributed file sharing system. Maybe you know BitTorrent. This is even more decentralized, where everyone at the same time is like a prosumer, basically. Like he is offering his storage for others to use for storing data, but at the same time also drawing data from others. And the files are stored in all instances at the same time. So not just like 1 or 2 or 3 times, but everyone is like partly storing some parts of everything. So the data is like sliced into many pieces. And this way you have a very, very decentralized ownership of the data in the internet, basically. And IPFS is a great way of storing data in a way that it cannot be censored by governments, for example. By the way, it has been used for the Catalan referendum, but at the end, the government managed to shut down the access through the gateway. People were not able to access the website that was used by the Catalan administration. But if people would know how to access IPFS through their IPFS access through a command line, they would be able to do it. But yes, of course, normal people don't know how to access a website through a command line. But yeah, so even nowadays, political fights, IPFS can already be used to, for example, store the votes. And yeah, the other things are for programming languages, and rootstock is an interesting connection between using the Bitcoin blockchain, but writing smart contracts in a way that they're done on Ethereum. So it's sort of a bridge between Ethereum and Bitcoin. And we're using some of Secure Scalabot's codes, which I will not go into detail. So like I said before, the Pantalasa is our mesh network, which works independently from blockchain. So it's basically that the users of this communication protocol of this network are partly storing their own data and also accessing others' data, but there's no central point of storing data like in WhatsApp, Facebook, and so on. And at the same time, it's a heavily encrypted algorithm. We are even writing this in a way that it's quantum safe, so it should be safe against future quantum computer hacks, because this would maybe able to crack the encryption of existing blockchain technologies. But because we're working blockchain agnostic, we want to have a platform that's already prepared for that. At the same time, it's delay tolerant, so you can use the network in an offline environment and still do the business, and whenever it synchronizes with the internet again, there will be no delays. Our underlying infrastructure, so we are using, we're creating our own code for ID and reputation, and we're creating an AI bot called Lucy that is responsible for ID and reputation on Pangea. We're drawing upon Ethereum at the moment for smart contracts, wallets, and escrow, tokenized assets, and the notarization. The timestamps that I mentioned before, but it could be exchanged for any other blockchain, maybe in the future for Tezos or EOS or anything that you can imagine. Just we're doing this because right now it's the most used blockchain for developing smart contracts. And for storage and search, we're using codes from IPFS, but also we're using this AI bot. So what we actually do ourselves is this Pangea platform, which is a decentralized, encrypted, open source dispute resolution chat mesh. So it's a very long word to describe what I was saying before. And it should enable you to create, on top of our Pangea platform, decentralized borderless virtual nations. So you can create these nations to your liking. You can choose your code of law, could be common law, civil code, Sharia, etc. You can use smart contract templates that are also being offered in the competition. They actually compete for reputation as well. And the idea is that people can use these smart contracts through a chat interface, even using emoticons. So maybe if they use the heart emoji, they would open up the smart contract templates, and they would just have to enter some fields, and they would already, let's say, start the process for calling upon an arbitrator, for example, if they have dispute. Also, you can use your arbitrators and witnesses for every contract or agreement that you do on Pangea. So you can choose if you want to do this through individual arbitrators, or you can use crowd juries. We will have, let's say, API for existing, let's say, blockchain solutions that are similar to the jury system in the US, I think. I'm not 100% sure. But you can choose if you want to do it through our arbitrator market or through external solutions. And I think that's the most interesting part. These are some examples of third-party applications of actual governance services that are on top of this platform that we're creating. So we're building the very infrastructure, but in the future, you will be able to build things like marriage. Like you could marry on the blockchain. You could do so like independently from the country where you live. You could be a gay couple in Iran, and you would do this using a pseudonymous account, of course. So you will not be retaliated by your local government because the names would be transparent, because the timestamps are publicly accessible. But they could, for example, store, or they could protect their assets this way. Or you could do land title applications, like I said, for Ghana. You could have birth certificates. You could do birth certificates independently from the place where you were born. You could be born on the blockchain, basically. You could do wills, peer-to-peer security. There's actually a DF that actually wants to work with us when our technology is mature enough. It's called vUmbrella, and it's more like localized peer-to-peer security, where people go on guard or something like that and protect each other. It's completely voluntary service for people who want to use it. Also, there would be healthcare. So you could start to design healthcare systems in a way that is borderless and independent from governance systems. And also things like resource allocation, like basic income, for example. We have German Nigrin who is working on that. And yeah, trade agreements, insurance, like any sort of insurance, unemployment insurance, for example. And yeah, I think there's no limit to all the things that you could provide on top of this, because there are so many things that are not being done well in local governance. There's many governance problems in the whole world. You could use Pangea to actually solve these local governance problems. You would just create the code, and you would go ahead and do a peer-to-peer network where people start acting by acting instead of waiting for the government to give them permission. So here's a short timeline. So Bitnation started already more than 3 years ago. Suzanne Torkowski-Tempelhoff was our founder. And we went basically through 3 iterations of Pangea. So in the first iteration, we did the mistake of trying to store everything on the blockchain. Like we were using the Horizon blockchain, and we wanted to store also the communications and everything. But we realized that this would be way too slow, and also wouldn't be good for privacy. We wanted to create a separate mesh network that we also do today, that is heavily encrypted and permits people to not only use this public ledger, the blockchain, to have transparent records, but to also at the same time have privacy. This is a very complicated, like you would think, contradiction, but there are actually ways to solve this dilemma. Then in 2015, we were offering blockchain IDs to stateless refugees. And many times it was rejected by local government authorities, but nevertheless, it was a good idea, I think, to show that you could give blockchain IDs to people who have absolutely no documentation at all. And there's a huge use case for all stateless refugees. Then in 2015, we did the cooperation with Estonia, the public notary. In 2016, we did the second iteration with Secure Scuttlebutt, and but we realized that their code was also a bit centralized, and we wanted to create our own mesh network that is independent. And yeah, since 2017, we started to draw on code from IPFS, start to create the PET token, which is, let's say, the currency that fuels this arbitration market. And we got the award for the refugee emergency response from the UNESCO NetExpo conference. And yeah, finally now, at the end of 2017, we started the token sale. We already had the pre-sale, and so starting from January or February, I'm not quite sure, we will start the public sale where people can invest any amounts. There's no entry limits. And people can use these tokens, of course, not only for trading, but also to actually buy arbitration services on our platform. And yeah, essentially all the governance DApps that will be built on top of our infrastructure, they will also accept this token you can get now. So I think it's a very universal currency, actually, that should govern, let's say, all these peer-to-peer governance ecosystems. And yeah, finally, we also decided to build our own AI bot, the Lucy bot, because we realized that when humans rate each other, there's always a factor of corruption. And whenever people do peer-to-peer agreements on Pangea, the reputation will not be done through the humans, but it will be measured through a bot. We'll have some sort of objective performance measure indicators. And you would have this in a more objective way, where you would only get reputation tokens whenever you successfully complete the contract. But for what? Yes, so it's basically an algorithm, of course. Every AI bot is an algorithm. And yeah, like I said before, if you're not happy or if you're not satisfied with the way we're creating this AI bot, or the reputation system will be working, of course, at any time you can fork our code, do exactly the same, and just change the way you do the reputation. But I think it's a very interesting experiment to try to do the reputation, or the way of doing reputation, in a way that is not forcing people to follow the whales, you know? Like in Steemit, for example, or in, like, maybe you've seen Black Mirror, there was one episode where they showed this. When you have people who gather a lot of reputation, people start to worship them, start to just do everything to their liking, to get good reputation from them, because their reputation is worth much more. And we don't want this kind of reputation prison systems, you know. So it should be a more objective reputation, and in this case, it's done through a bot. But this is just for the agreements, the reputation that is that you get for successfully fulfilling a contract. But the nations that are created and the smart contract templates, they still have human reputation. But we're still in the phase of designing these things. And I think really interestingly, one of our former members, Rafi, said, "My aim is to help spread the overall peer-to-peer movement and its reflection through Bitcoin and similar technologies. Bitnation represents that very idea in a diverse and versatile manner that not only empowers individuals, but also entire nations who have been left without voice. So you could imagine any sort of indigenous tribe or minorities, like it could be gay people in Russia, it could be like any sort of minority anywhere in the world. They could start to create their own peer-to-peer virtual nation to help each other without waiting for the government to help them. And I think even more indigenous tribes could, for example, reclaim their lands using blockchain titles, and you could actually see how it works, like the consensus that they would get from the network, and like how much consensus do you have, for example, for corporations to take away the rainforest to just build their mines or anything, you know. They just need the government permission. But if you actually have a network of peer-to-peer, of peer people, of individuals who know that these people are the ones who live there, you could start to have a new perspective on this legal fight. And I think it's interesting to give these nations actually a new voice through the blockchain. Furthermore, you can create your own governance project on Considerate, and you can have people voting if they think this is a project that should be supported or not. And I think we have some examples here. You can just post your project and people will vote on it. Depending on how much approval you get, you can already access some Ether from a connected Ether wallet. And you could start acting on your project. But this would only be done on a certain threshold, and I think if the budget for your project is beyond a specific limit, you would also need approval from the core team. There would also be a consensus mechanism for the majority. But in general, I think it's a good idea to see like which kind of projects are desired by the community. And yeah, you can already have a test, let's say, for whether people actually want what you want to build or not. And the embassies that I mentioned before, there's actually one Bitnation consulate in a way here in Barcelona. It's Tostarero Studios. It's actually more creative and space for musicians. But Taiko Carol, he was inviting hackers to also go into space and to have a sort of synergy between the more artist people and the more hacker people. Maybe there could be some new synergies coming from that. And I think it's a nice example of how you could literally use any space to invite Bitnation citizens. Also, we have embassies and consulates all over the world. Like any sort of hacker space can just say they're a Bitnation consulate and invite people to join them. And I try to make interviews with them, to catch up with them, to like give them a bit more exposure. And I think it's also a great way to get more publicity for your space or your projects in your local, your local project by making it consulate.
You live here, right?
Yes, like I live close to here, but I travel around and I try to set up, let's say, more local Bitnation meetups. And yeah, I travel back and forth between Berlin and Barcelona. For now, yeah. And also one interesting example of an actual embassy where people can live in Istanbul. I think this could also be an interesting use case, like not only for travelers or hackers, but also for refugees. So Eileen, yeah, she wants people not only to work there, but if they have problems or yeah, if they have like any legal troubles, like she could also have them for a few days if they yeah, agree to her how's it called? To her housing rules, to her house rules. And finally, this is our founder, Suzanne Tarkowski-Tempelhoff. She said, what we're doing is making nation-state governments entirely irrelevant. No government, whether democratic or autocratic, can survive without the consent of its subjects. In the same way Bitcoin has transformed the financial systems, Bitnation will irreversibly change the political system and the course of history. So you see, this is a very big aim, and we start, let's say, with the very basic foundations of having ID, reputation, arbitration. But yeah, eventually the idea is really to offer all the services that current governance services offer that are desired in a peer-to-peer way to make everyone more independent from the way the government is working today. So you can always choose to opt out, or if you don't like it, to also come back. So it's all very voluntary. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. This is the way services should work. And finally, we have been covered by several news outlets, and had interviews in Vice and Forbes and many other news outlets. So yeah, we have already had enough exposure, let's say, and now we're actually tapping into the scaling phase. We're now starting to have this token sale to actually make this project much bigger, because in the last 3 years everything was voluntary. Suzanne Tarkowski-Teplo was investing her private funds into this and just lived on top of that. And all the contributions that were done before were voluntary. And just now with investments, we can actually offer programmers and other people to work full-time and to really get this to the next level. So it becomes something usable, not only, let's say, a debating club. And so we can actually offer tangible services to people all over the world. And that's it. So now I would like, if we can have, let's say, an open discussion, so really anyone can have questions, like no matter how stupid you think the questions, please ask it, because there's for sure other people who are thinking of the same. And I mean, if you have any proposals or already have an idea of how you could, let's say, change this or use this to change existing things, please propose them, and I'm all ears.
I'm very interested about the smart contracts. I understand why they are so secure, but I don't know how legal accepted are they. For example, 80% of my customers are Americans, so I have a lot of trouble with customs. So I see a way to avoid that through the smart contract. Can you explain me if legal accepted? Because I don't know. I see the idea, but I don't know for real.
Yeah. So the question was if deals or agreements done on Pangea, if they would be accepted by the existing jurisdictions, or if they're legitimate. So first of all, I must say this is actually also a very important use case that I must point out, because in any international transaction, there's no jurisdiction that governs this agreement. So whenever you buy something on eBay, or also even on Amazon, usually there's no court that you can go to when this international deal didn't succeed. You only have reputation, and you can give this person a bad reputation. But for Pangea, you would actually have this smart contract governing the agreement. So it doesn't have to be that it is fully accepted by the existing nation states, but they don't also necessarily have to know about it, because you could also use, for example, I don't know, pseudonymous accounts, and also the very interesting thing about doing these international deals with smart contracts is that you have escrow. So the funds, so the money that you pay, you don't send it directly to the person that is doing a service or sending you a product. it will be, let's say, frozen in a multi-sig wallet. It's like an account that you can only, where you can only unleash the funds when you have 2 or 3 keys, for example. So the 2 keys could be, for example, the buyer and the supplier. But for example, the buyer is not satisfied with what is being done. There would also be an arbitrator that I said before that will be the arbitrator for this agreement. So this arbitrator could, for example, if there's a dispute, say, okay, this was a bad service and the money should be returned. Or he could say it was done in a valid way and he has to send the money. Or he said it's valid and he will give his key so the supplier will get the funds actually. So I think this is a very interesting new alternative that you didn't have before for international deals. And yes, maybe it's not fully recognized by the existing jurisdictions, but you don't need their permission actually. You can already do these agreements anyways on the internet, and you don't have an international jurisdiction or world government that governs these agreements. You just do online trading anyways.
But if it's not recognized, it's like this ID that you do. For example, now I want to go for 4 months to Japan. But legally, I'm only allowed for 3 months. But with your electronic ID, because it doesn't relate any of the local laws, then I can stay legally for the 4 months.
Well, sorry to interrupt. Obviously not. But
Yes,
the idea is to create something new.
Yeah,
It will take time to.
But they will not let it happen.
Yeah, but nothing will let it happen. Enough people to.
So it's like
it will be independent if 90% of the people went on the street. It's not.
Well, that happened, and
It
we
didn't
are not.
happen. That's why.
That's what I'm saying. 90% vote yes, and we are not. Because who are in the power doesn't let it happen.
It didn't happen. It's just for me an example. Like anyone can say something to this. If people in Catalonia wanted to be independent, so that 90% or even 70% would have gone on the street, all of them, and said, until we get things our way, we're not going to move any. People didn't do it.
People do the streets for.
Yeah, not enough people.
That's nothing to do with this.
No, but I'm just comparing it to the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just a comparison, no? Who agrees with you?
So I would say, I think in any movement there's like a critical mass that actually decides upon whether it can succeed or not. Also with cryptocurrency, for example, Bitcoin, like people were thinking this is useless, this is just like a scam or whatever, and it's not until more people were starting to use it, it actually gained value and gained more recognition also by countries, and actually became recognized even by some countries as a currency. But this only happens gradually over time, the more market adoption it gets. So the same case also with Bitnation, in the way that you need to have people already using it, even when you don't know if it's legal or not, until it becomes legal. So there's always this gray zone where you don't know how it will turn out. But in any case, what we offer is that you can use also pseudonymous accounts, so you will not be retaliated by your local governments. So yeah, I think this is something that Bitcoin does offer, for example.
This reminds me of PayPal.
Mm.
PayPal came out, it has to get recognized in other systems by all the different companies, the credit cards, and then it became a system.
Yes, yes, it's like that with any system actually. So yes.
Can I speak in Spanish?
Yeah, you can say it in Spanish, and I can say it.
Creo que tú me entiendes ahora.
Sí, sí.
Así que hay que tener en cuenta, o sea, los que ostentan el poder ahora mismo, controlan el sistema y con todo el mundo, van a reaccionar y qué pueden hacer. Sí, bueno, PayPal, pues sí, se han instaurado, pero no sé, tampoco no veo mucho, o les mueve mucho el cajón, ¿no? A los que están ahí. Entonces, Bitcoin, bueno, todavía ahora mismo está, o sea, no tiene mucha utilidad, se está para especular. similar ahora mismo, para que sustituya la primera, pero quiere decir, claro, estamos sometidos, esclavizados por los poderes, tenemos que tener en cuenta cómo pueden reaccionar, claro, a nosotros seguramente ya nos ven afuera otros tipos y esto, pero tenemos que tenerlo en cuenta. O sea, sí que sí, podemos hacer esto, podemos hacer esto, pero ¿qué pueden hacer? O cómo anticiparnos a lo que hacen, ¿sabes? Porque es algo interesante, que no somos mundo mejor. Pero claro, es que estamos realizados, sometidos, ¿no? Pesados por una élite, ¿no? De gente, por una élite, un grupo pequeño de gente que así, ¿no? Y a los que nos es muy difícil quitar el camino o eliminarlos. Además, no una revolución sangrienta para eliminarlos, como creo que he leído algo, ¿no? Incluso en el texto que habéis puesto en el lugar. Pero claro, no se van a dejar tan fácilmente de dar su poder, ¿no?
So the point is that yeah, we live in a, let's say, centralized world where we're subject to the way things work. But if we want to abolish this, or if we want to go out of this, we have to go through, let's say, a painful process, and it will be very gradual. But in the end, the reward will be freedom. So yeah, the point is just like with Bitcoin, or just like with any other new idea that has to fight against an existing idea. It will take time, but I think in the end, good ideas will always take over. Like because ideas don't die; they just, if they are good ideas, they stay around. And I think this is also what we're doing with Bitnation. We just start this idea, we start this market, we start to change this paradigm. But yeah, I mean, even if we don't succeed, the idea will already be out there. That's the whole point, like to get the things going. Yes?
But the idea is that somehow every person joining this network has the same voice. So no one should be over the other one, and the credits are coming through the community. Somehow everybody has the same rights. But I'm still scared because someone will own the system and will put himself over the system again. So we have the same situation right here now. Someone will take over and will somehow put his spin on the system. So finally we have a different class system again. How can this only be avoided, that maybe you as the founder or someone of the founders finally take the system in their advantage again?
So it's actually just by the code itself impossible to take over, because you have, for any service that you use, you always have competition. You always have different templates, you have different arbitrators, you have different nations where you can choose if you want to use them or not. So actually any smart contract that you're entering into is only when you voluntarily agree to it. There's no person forcing you to accept any agreement on Pangea. And even if for some reason you think there's someone exploiting the system, all the code is open source. So if you think there's, let's say, a governance problem in our governance market, then you can still start your own alternative.
How many alternatives are at the moment? So how many systems are really competing to each other?
So we already had 2 forks, basically with people who didn't agree with Suzanne Tarkovsky-Temple's way of doing it. It's iNation and vNation, I think. So they were using part of our code and changing things. But I think they just didn't like our vision, because they wanted to work with the existing jurisdictions, but what we do is create a new jurisdiction, a blockchain jurisdiction that is outside of the existing system. And I think they didn't feel comfortable with that.
Can you elaborate?
So like I said before, we are forced to live in this nation-state paradigm where things are done in a very local way when people already live in an international lifestyle and have businesses doing like in an international way. So instead of waiting for each of these local nation-state jurisdictions to adapt their laws to this new change, let's say, in thinking and living, and even like anything, like doing business, marriage, or whatever. Instead of this, you could already have a borderless system like Bitnation, which is a new jurisdiction. So we didn't have any worldwide jurisdiction yet, and even if there was a world government by the UN or something like that, it would be imposed upon the people. What we want is jurisdiction as a service. This is basically what Bitnation offers. It's offering competing jurisdictions.
Choice,
yeah, exactly.
But the person or the people who thought a bit differently, so they went a different way with the same soul coding or but somehow now you have a competitor, but they are under the name of Bitnation. Or how do you, if there are now different Bitnations, and I would join the A because there I like the legislation better than the B. What is ahead? How they finally you are competing in the system? I don't understand. So it will be Bitnation will be one, or will be over everything like an umbrella. So
these that you mentioned, they do their own thing. Like they work with existing governments, and I don't think that they create new jurisdictions. I think they just try to improve the existing system. But in Bitnation, like I said, they're competing DBVNs, like these virtual nations, competing with each other for citizens. And there's no entity governing, let's say, all of this. The only rule that all of these have to comply with is that they cannot oblige people to be their citizens. Membership should always be voluntary. That's the only rule. That you cannot force people to be your citizens. Like you can't force them to come to your nation. You also can't force them to leave the nation. They can only have. You can't force them to stay in the nation when they don't want to. What could happen is that they have a really bad reputation, but I think still in that case they would still be part of the nation. They would just be sort of blacklisted if they were bad, if they were always cheating in their agreements, but they would still be part as a citizen. So you cannot, let's say, forcefully bring people in or out of the nations.
But at the moment there's only one virtual nation. Or they're not.
In the moment, there's still just the development phase of creating this, and there's already several people who want to start their DBVNs. We already had, for example, Venezuela, people who want to offer services instead of the Venezuelan government, because there's a big governance failure in Venezuela. There's people who want to offer services for refugees, like internationally. There will be even, I think, a gay nation offering services to gay people all over the world who are being suppressed by their governments.
Now, activism.
What?
That was political activism in
but this,
anonymous way.
This is not only activism, this is actually about services. This is about creating, let's say, a parallel system. Like doing the things that you were not allowed to do because your current governance structure was not allowing you to do it, and you could do it in a virtual nation, actually. Yeah, exactly. So the comment was that you don't have to be in the same place geographically to do any agreements or to work together or to do business together. This is also one big idea of creating VPNs and creating virtual nations, that culture and this feeling of belonging, it's not no longer anymore only locally. You can already feel part of a global group. You can feel part of something that transcends borders, which is not permitted, or which is not being expressed through the current nation-state oligopoly, where people are just forced to be a culture that is, that is forced upon us through artificial lines on a map.
It's just be shut down, you know, shut down the internet, shut down
like I said before, we are creating a mesh network that is working also offline, also without the internet. And ideally in the future, we will also see a decentralized internet. So I think there's also blockchain projects that are working on that to create peer-to-peer internet, basically, and to take away the power of governments over the internet.
So there's a lot of systems that are open to that. So consider maybe 2020 projects, start of projects, maybe 20 people. What are you doing out there? So it's just interacting with them, trying to running them. What is your approach when there's a lot of different systems of
So what we could do, or the question was, what do we do with all the existing identity projects to create identity on the blockchain, right? Yes. So what we could do is to integrate them. So we are right now experimenting with Uport, I think. But whenever there's there's also Keybase, I think, and there's like different competing ways of doing ID. But ideally, I think we would just register, or we would just administer the IDs that are registered on top of our platform, and maybe the owners of different ID platform would want to have interoperability with us. So yeah, I think in the blockchain space in general, you're interested in let's say joining arms to speed up development. And when they see that we have a large enough member base, you know, they will also want to have a more or less same standard, or maybe agree on some way of interacting with each other. So yeah, I don't think there should be a standard war, like which ID would be the best one. I think there should just be like experimentation phase for example, verifying who is who, like to prevent cheats, to prevent Sybil attacks. So people would create fake ideas to use that for reputation and so on. Like maybe there could be a phase of like trial and error, which works and which doesn't. And I think different platforms will also see each other, like how they're advancing, how they're progressing, which works the best. So yeah, I think all of these things don't happen in a vacuum. Like we're also interacting with each other.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm quite new to it, but when I hear, I think there's a good intention, but sometimes I also get always in my back that it's kind of a dark net where you do funny things and try to avoid the authority. So how, especially as I think you are pitching something at the moment, you want to sell something. You want to sell something, we are somehow maybe get interested in the idea and somehow participate to make the community bigger. So you are pitching an idea, you're trying to sell something. But if I now sitting here quite new from the talk today, I'm not sure what would be now your product. Second, I would say, it sounds like a bit dodgy, a bit darknet, and trying to make contracts, some people with other countries where I can avoid at the moment the current legal status, which we try maybe to avoid. Sounds for me at the moment not really appealing, or I'm a bit maybe totally confused what you explained.
Bitcoin is the same.
But it's more, Bitcoin is really currency that you have a box, you have something, but here it's something you want, like the health system, you want somehow override with your system, education system, and many other systems. It's a new government, virtual government, and you can choose. So anyway, this took me out of the frame of getting independent from Spain. So this is even negative impact for this kind of system, because you don't want to be independent of the system, you want to create something new. So So there we got it totally wrong already right from the beginning, become independent of Spain using this kind of system. Because here you are virtual entities.
And everyone sense
yeah, but then you have to create a virtual new state, Catalonia. It shouldn't be independent of Spain. This is totally nonsense. This is totally against the system of what I understand what is nation.
So first of all, maybe Catalans don't, like maybe there's some Catalans who think they don't need to have this official recognition of their state, but they could already in fact work as if they would be independent. So
they have to do it in here, not just using the workflow by using some voting here and then to avoid that maybe the Spanish government. This is already negative for the whole system because people use for their personal idea a system which should be open for everyone, but they exclude already.
But wait, when you create the Catalonia 2.0, what we're actually
we don't
talking
talk about in general. We talk now not only Catalonia. I think there are so many other more important issues in Catalonia. So we talk about Israel or in Africa and so many other important issues. Catalonia is not an important issue in the world. So how can a government in Ghana or in the gay community really use the system in favor to make their life better? And against a system which is negative, which is overtaking them, which is even threatening them, how can they use the system really to have advantages for their life?
So first of all, I must say I'm not selling anything. I'm just spreading the word and then trying to explain the idea. I'm not
selling.
No, I'm not selling it. I'm not telling you to.
No, it's not
buy
negative. It's not selling. Is not negative. Then you say selling is negative. Spreading the word is getting people involved, getting involved. I'm in sales and marketing. What you're doing is trying to convince people. This is sales. You sell yourself all the time. And that sales is nothing negative. So to avoid saying sales is negative. So you want to get people on board. That is a sale. It's a pitch. So
yes, you can say it like this, but I'm not trying to get any financial commitments or anything.
No, sales has nothing to do with money. No, you sell yourself every day. If you go to this, you sell yourself. You don't want the money from anyone. You do sales. Here, 100%. This is a sales talk. Nothing what you want to make benefits. So you have already a wrong concept of sales. So sales has nothing to do with money. You sell yourself every time. It doesn't mean you want to have a profit from it. So selling an idea is also a non-profit idea to make the world different. So you're selling a better world.
Okay.
So it's nothing negative. Sales is not negative. So it's really important to put it in your brain. What you're doing, you're pitching, selling, but nothing like this commercial, overtaking other people and influencing other people in a negative way. You want to get them on board for a positive new idea.
Okay, so regarding your other question about how these minorities and people who would be interested in using new peer-to-peer nations, how it would actually help them. Well, it helps them because they can actually take action instead of just raising their voice. Because you have many times in the world movements who are trying to be heard, who try to change the system from its sides, who go through a very, very slow legal process of trying to make everyone agree on what they want. You have a majoritarian rule. Because the existing system, you always need to have a majority consensus in order to offer something new or to change something inside of the existing system. But here, instead of trying to make everyone agree with your idea, you would just create something new where you just have people interacting with you who share your idea. So instead of waiting, you can already create a peer-to-peer economy online. And of course, this would not substitute everything. I know, like you still live in the physical world and you still have suppression, but it might help you with like individual things that we're starting to offer step by step. And I think, for example, a basic income would be a good start, for example, to help people all over the world to just get by in the existing system where they live in today.
How to make that happen?
What specifically? So Johan Nygren, he's one of the developers of for third-party applications, and he had the idea for the transaction web, or he calls it resilience. So he's using a concept of pathways. So instead of people having pay like taxes like every month or every year or a pattern like that, every time you make a transaction, you choose yourself how much percent you want to donate basically to the system, and depending on whether the person who you send money to will also let's say give a part of the next transaction also to the system, depending on that you will get payouts, let's say. And it works more in the way of dividends. So I don't understand specifically how the mathematics behind it works, but in a way it's like a positive pyramid scheme, like he calls it like that himself. So you have people continually making transactions in this web, and like every time when there's the next transaction, your dividends will be unlocked and it will be calculated depending on your own percentage and on the percentage of the next person. Yes. The comment was that also in Finland there's also an experiment for basic income. I think it's done amongst random parts of the population to see how it affects on their life, basically, and how it changes also the economy. Of course, this is still done in a very geographic and localized way, but what people do is really do international basic income, that it's like independent from where you were born, which could really help people in the developing world to, let's say, get their foot off the ground and to start doing things other than just trying to survive. And I mean, it's just an experiment. If it fails, there could be other people who might do it in a better way. And still, it's all just voluntary. It's not like a tax that you have to pay. It's a voluntary tax system. That's a big difference. And it would also work for the reputation, so people could maybe get a better reputation in the market for, let's say, being generous in this system. So I think it could also benefit your position in the market.
I believe that the mindset needs to change. If you just replace one system with the next system, I can make example after example, there's no need. And we're just going from one shit to the next shit, trying to change things.
Y para mí es algo muy importante. Creo que en parte los gobiernos son un poquito reflejo del resto de la sociedad, ¿no? O sea que pienso también que los que ganan mucho a los gobiernos y a las grandes multinacionales y corporaciones son gente con ciertas características personales que una persona más honrada, más honesta o más humana no puede llegar. Pero en parte todos los gobiernos son un poco reflejo de la sociedad. Así que, claro, creo que algo que está también en la base es eso, es el decir, ¿no? Está diciendo cuidado porque a lo mejor, eso, a lo mejor ahora nosotros como gobernantes de cada uno de los países del mundo, a lo mejor el mundo no cambiaría mucho al final. Primero, pienso que hay que cambiar algo, claro, ¿no? Ponerlo también en la filosofía un poco de por dentro, ¿no? Claro, pues eso. Fastidiar al vecino, intentar ayudarse, básicamente. Es que por eso se arreglaría muchas cosas.
So the comment was basically that we should try to, like also with our neighbors in our local environment, we should try to help each other and not try to just make each other angry, and to also step by step go ahead with changing these things, and that also the existing systems, they also take note of what is happening, and like I also think they want to, or they would use this as an incentive to change themselves as well, just like Estonia, to make this step towards becoming more digital, offering their service not only in their geographical territory but worldwide. So what the e-citizenship is doing is that people all over the world can become, let's say, online citizens of Estonia, to register their companies there and to pay taxes to the Estonian authorities, even though they don't live there. And this is a way of attracting people to their jurisdiction, even though they don't live in Estonia. This is like one step that Estonia maybe is also taking to survive, because they're losing much of their labor. They're going to the UK or to other places in Europe. And I think many other countries in the world, they would also be interested in offering and opening up their supply of governance services, not only to their small population, but to the whole world, to start to see this as an actual international and global market.
To provide this technology.
So yes, from the investments, now from the token sale, we want to provide these funds also for third-party DApp developers. So people who make these programs that enable individuals to do these peer-to-peer things. So we would actually fund people who work on, let's say, peer-to-peer health insurance that is international, peer-to-peer unemployment insurance, all of these things. And most importantly, we wouldn't decide upon this ourselves. There would be, we are working on a way to distributing these funds in a community way. Like I showed with Consider It, there would be votings on each project. Based on that, we would also distribute the funds. There would also be, like I said, the limits. Like if it's too high budget, then there should also be the majority of the core team agreeing to it, but we will not be able to choose this is better than this. It should be based on the community voting.
So for instance, in Africa, following the how are you giving
So what we also want to do is with the ambassador network, not only to have the, like I said, the diplomatic ambassadors who try to help Bitnation citizens to be validated and so legally accepted by the existing system, but we would also have technical ambassadors who will like be locally responsible for showing people how to use our technology. And yeah, like that there should be someone who in any case you could come to or ask if you don't understand how it works. So yes, ideally there should also be local representatives in developing world countries to help these people.
Maybe they don't have smartphones. They don't have nothing. Okay? So I mean, so sometimes we need some kind of low level technology to guide them. I think it's in India they're using this scan to identify people, and at some point some people are trying to like creating keys from the scan to give access only to one person. And they to use create keys only with one. It's just using geometry like key. They don't have to have some ideas of that. I think that people that use Facebook and Twitter and so on, it's very easy to do. It's very difficult to all this technology carry for people. I think it's a big challenge. It's mainly you have some ideas about giving forms, a lot of forms to give some kind of
So the point is that in developing parts of the world, many people don't even have any of these, or no way of accessing these technologies yet. They would much rather maybe want to use biometric scans for their private keys. They would actually need other things. And so there should be like a lot of funds allocated just for them to be able to access these services. I think in many cases, people are able to, for example, share the smartphone with their family or something like that. I know that also in very poor regions, of course, any of this doesn't help. But in any case, we're against the biometric validation, because this is something that governments will make use of for sure. They will tap into this biometric data, and they will probably retaliate or like track who is using things out of their system, then they will be immediately able to see who it is. Even if they're pseudonymous, if they use biometric data, that's over. So I know that, for example, Suzanne, our founder, she says, like introducing biometric data on blockchain will lead to the next big genocide. So she said something like this. Like when you have a passport, you know, like they take your face and they have your fingerprints and they take your biometric data. So this could be used to like track, let's say, like millions of people who were, for example, stateless or who were living illegally or something like that. And all of them, they could just be tracked down by governments now because they're all listed on the blockchain when you introduce biometrics to the blockchain.
The token sale at the moment is a kind of more donation, or what is?
No. So the token sale, you buy pet tokens. These pet tokens are the currency that is used for the services that I mentioned before. Whenever
they're not up and running, many of them. They are in the process.
Yes, right now it's in the development
stage. You need the token for the money to make them work, and then finally you might have advantage if